Basics of derivative pricing and valuation. Now we'll spend about 10 minutes on learning basics on derivatives. Derivative is a financial instrument which derives its value based on the value of underlying asset. So derivative is a financial instrument which derives value based on the value of underlying asset. And we know that there are roughly 4 categories of derivative that we have to look at for the level 1 exams. The first one is forward contract. Forward contract is a OTC contract, or it is a OTC instrument. What is the meaning of OTC? Over the counter. That means 2 parties will sit together and then they will enter into an agreement to either buy or sell goods at a predetermined price on a predetermined date. And the moment a contract is OTC, one of the big concern that parties will have is the default risk. The next category of derivative is future contract. Future contracts are essentially exchange traded instrument. So these are exchange traded contracts, and future contract will have no default risk because of whom? Yes, they will have no default risk because of clearing houses, which are of course the part of exchanges, because clearing house takes the responsibility of ensuring that there is no default, and this is typically achieved by asking investors or speculators to deposit margin in their accounts. The next category of derivative were option contracts, and the most important word which summarizes the entire option contracts is asymmetry of the contracts. Extremely important word. When you would learn, when you go to CFA Level 2 and Level 3, you would realize that most of the mathematical models which are developed for option valuation are because of asymmetry of the contract, which means at one stage it will only have a right or only have an obligation, whereas in case of forward and future we had right and obligation together. So options are further into 2 categories, a call option and a put option. And next category of derivative, now option contracts, are they OTC or ETC? Option contract are both. They are OTC as well as ETC. And swap contracts, these are essentially agreement between 2 parties to exchange pre-specified set of cash flows based on performance of certain asset classes, and in most of the cases these are OTC contracts. Are we fine? So how we would deal with this syllabus? We will go as per the LOS fashion. However, I will be reshuffling few of the LOS out of order so that it becomes more logical. So the first point of discussion which is required is understanding the concept of arbitrage, then understanding the concept of replication, and understanding the concept of risk neutrality. Arbitrage, replication and risk neutrality. Now you would have substantially better understanding of this particular LOS by the time we finish the reading. Okay, as of now I'll just give you an overview of how it works. Now the idea of arbitrage is, let us say we have an asset A and we have a derivative on asset A, so let me call this as derivative 1, and we have another category of derivative on asset A, let me call this as derivative 2. Now these derivatives are structured in such a way that if you make a portfolio of D1 and D2, then the behavior of that portfolio will always be equal to A. That means if A increases, D1 plus D2 portfolio will increase. If A decreases, D1 plus D2 will decrease. Then the idea is that at any point of time the value of A should be equal to D1 plus D2, and if it is not, then anyone can exploit an arbitrage, which means they will buy whatever is cheaper and they will sell whatever is expensive. So then This arbitrage gives us an opportunity to value derivative. For example, let's say we know the value of A, we know the value of D2. We can always say D1 would be equal to A minus D1. So when we do options and certain category of forwards, you will have a better understanding of what were those D1 and D2. The second one is replication, which is again the same concept, that portfolio A can be replicated by using a combination of portfolio D1 and D2. Are we fine with this? And the last one, risk neutrality. Here we would make an assumption. So to understand risk neutrality, we need to go a little bit into portfolio management. There are three categories of investors: risk averse, risk loving, and risk neutral. Risk averse investor means essentially the ones who dislike risk. But that does not mean that risk averse investor will never take risk. Okay, so as far as exams is concerned, you want to think of these investors as the rational investor. Okay, whereas both risk loving and risk neutral are not necessary in the rational category. And what rationality mean here is that if the risk increases, then a risk averse investor will demand excess returns. Okay, so if an investor is more risk averse, then he will demand even more excess return for given level of risk. This is the meaning of risk aversion. Then risk loving investor, he would not worry about what is the return earned. He would select a portfolio, tell me, with highest risk. Okay, so a risk lover or risk loving investor derives maximum utility by additional level of risk. And a risk neutral investor, he does not worry about the level of risk. Okay, so irrespective of what is the level of risk, it does not matter to him because he is neutral on risk. And how this concept would be used in derivative pricing is, we are going to assume that no matter what asset class we are talking about, a risk neutral investor will always want to earn risk-free rate of return. Why? Because even if it's a risky asset, it doesn't matter to him. He's a neutral investor, and therefore any category of asset, the assumption would be that investor wants to earn risk-free rate of return. And this concept would particularly be helpful when we will learn option pricing model using the binomial tree. Okay, this is where we would learn to calculate risk neutral probabilities. Should we go ahead? The next three LOS are related to forward and future contract. So first we will start with the forward contracts. We know that forward contract is essentially an agreement where one party, which is long, will have right and obligation to buy, and the other party, which is short, will have right and obligation to sell a predetermined quantity on a predetermined date at a predetermined price. And if you are long on this contract, then essentially you have a bullish position because you would want these prices to go up. And if you are short on the contract, then you have a bearish position because you want underlying asset prices to go down. Should we go ahead? So let us say now we have signed a contract. The price of an underlying asset today was 100, and we decided to take a long position on the same underlying asset, that after 1 year we are committing to buy that underlying asset at a price of 110. Okay. Now this spot price will keep on fluctuating for the whole year. Maybe it will go down or it will go up. So let us say by the end of the year, spot price was 150. If you are long on this contract, is it a profit or loss? Is it a profit or loss? Profit, because we have a right and obligation to buy at a price of 110 and the price in the market is 150. We are buying cheaper. We have a profit of 40. This profit of 40 is called the value of forward contract. And how I want you to think of value is simply the amount of profit that we are earning at any point of time. Now here in this example, we have calculated value on the last day. We can also calculate value in between. But what value essentially means, the amount of profit or loss earned on the contract. As against that, this 110 is called the price of forward contract. Okay, so finding out what amount is to be quoted inside the contract would be called as price, and finding out the amount of profit or loss would be called as value. Are we okay here? Now we will spend some time on understanding how to price forward contract. Okay, so heading in your notes would be pricing a forward contract. Now let us say spot price is 100, risk-free rate of return 10%, maturity of a forward contract is 1 year, and the forward contract price, this is what we want to learn to calculate. But for the time being, I'm going to assume that this forward contract price is 130. Now ideally this price should have been some other value. Okay, but if it is 130, we can use this scenario to our benefit and try to earn some arbitrage profit out of it. And this type of arbitrage would be called as, the type of arbitrage that we can exploit in this scenario would be called as cash and carry arbitrage. Okay, so now observe carefully what we're doing here. These are the, just a minute. These are the step of actions you will perform today, and these are the actions you will perform 1 year from now. Step number 1, what you do now is go to a bank and take a loan of 100 at the rate of 10%. Then step number 2, buy underlying at spot price, which is how much? 100. That means you go to a bank, take 100 rupees and use that 100 rupee and buy the underlying asset. In step number 3, take a short position in the forward contract. Short position means right and obligation to sell, which means after 1 year, irrespective of what happens to the price of the asset, we have to sell that asset at a price of 130. And from where will we get the asset? We already have it. We already purchased that asset, which means no matter what happens in the market, 1 year from now, we are going to sell that asset at a price of 130. But to the bank, we are required to deposit how much? 110. And that means in this process, you are going to earn an arbitrage of 20 rupees. So what we are understanding here is, in order to avoid this arbitrage, the price which would have done that, had this contract price been 110. Since the contract price was more than that, we said forward is overvalued, and therefore we took a short position in the forward contract. Is that fine? Should we go ahead? Now the opposite scenario. Spot is 100. Again RFR is 10%. Maturity is 1 year. And forward price now is 80. Now in this kind of scenario, the arbitrage that we will exploit would be called as reverse cash and carry. So what do you do in reverse cash and carry? Step number 1, take a short position on underlying asset. Short position on underlying asset 100. Now this is a naked short position. It's a theoretical assumption. What it meant is that you went to a friend of yours who was a broker. You said, can I borrow a stock from you? And then you sold that stock in the market with an assumption that we have received this 100 today with us. Is that fine? Without having the stock, we have sold the stock. Step number 2, we will deposit that 100 in a bank. Now again, I'm saying bank. It should not be a bank ideally because it's an RFR. Right? But I'm saying bank just to simplify the understanding. So deposit 100 in a bank at the rate of 10%. And step number 3, take a long position in forward contract. So long position in forward contract means write an obligation to buy. And if you have an obligation to buy, how much amount do we need? 80. But do we have 80? Will we have 80 rupees after 1 year? Yes. In fact, we will have more than 80. We will have 110. Isn't it? So after 1 year, bank will give us 110, out of which 80 we will use for the contract purpose, which will give us a stock. How much is left for ourselves? 30. And what will we do with that stock? We will give it back to the broker. So again, to avoid the arbitrage in this scenario, the forward price should have been how much? 110. Had the price been 110, there wouldn't have been any arbitrage. But since the price was less than 80, since the price was less than 110, which was 80, the forward was undervalued, and therefore we decided to take a long position. Is that making sense? So for your exams, you're not expected to remember how to exploit this arbitrage, but what you would be expected to remember is which arbitrage is to be used when. So just make this summary with me. If the forward contract is overvalued, then we short forward. Since it is expensive, we should sell it. And when we short forward, it is called as cash and carry arbitrage. When the forward contract is undervalued, we take a long position on the forward, and this scenario is called as reverse cash and carry. So here we've made a theoretical assumption. So the question is asking is that when you borrow stock, won't there be a cost to borrow that stock? Plus, it is okay for us to invest at RFR, but can we borrow at RFR? Only government can borrow at RFR. So therefore, what calculations we're doing as of now, these are called as theoretical no arbitrage price. And this is a base case scenario to understand what should be the minimum price of forward contract. So based on this, in the previous example, what we said is when the spot was 100, N was 1, RFR was 10%, no arbitrage forward price should have been 110. Both the arbitrage told us that. So that gives us a formula which says forward price is equal to spot price into 1 plus interest rate raised to n. In our example, n was 1. So let's practice a couple of questions on this. Let us say spot price of an asset is 2500. Risk-free rate of return is 6% continuously compounded. Maturity of the contract is 180 days. Find out what should be the value or price of forward. Okay. The formula that we've learnt, was that the formula for price or was that the formula for value? The formula that we've learned, is that for price or is that for value? That was for price, which means we cannot calculate value as of now. The only thing that we will calculate is price. And what should be the amount that should be quoted in the contract? Solve. 6% continuously compounded. 2575. Alright, let's solve together. We learned how to use continuous compounding when we were in school. Forward price is equal to spot into 1 plus interest rate raised to n. But since we have continuous compounding here, I'm going to change the formula slightly. So now I'm going to say spot into e raised to RT. And how will we use e raised to RT? 2500 into e raised to 6% into 180 divided by 365. And how to do this on your financial calculator? Please do this with me. 6% into 180 divided by 365. Second e raised to x multiplied with 2500. How much is that? 257. Fine. Let me just round it off. 76. You don't have to do that. This is, see, this is actually the conversion into discrete rate. It's the same thing. Right? So there is no shortcut to this. You have to learn continuous compounding. Half of your level 2 syllabus works on how continuous compounding is to be used. So if you don't know this, sit for 2 hours and practice 100 questions, maybe if required 1000, but make sure you know how to calculate this. Okay, let's do one more. We are still on pricing a forward contract. Spot is 1750. Risk-free rate of return 8% per annum. If nothing is mentioned, it's always annual compounding. Let us say expiry of the contract or maturity of the contract is 3 months. Find out no arbitrage forward price. 1784. So forward is equal to spot into 1 plus interest rate raised to n, 1750 into 1 plus 8% raised to 3 divided by 12. So that would give us 1784 point some value. So 1784 is your no arbitrage forward price. Okay, so pricing is straightforward and simple. You just need to know the formula. Now in this case you could have also done this using your TVM row. So let's do it quickly. Second clear TVM. 1750 present value, 8 as IY, 3 by 12 equal to is N. Compute future value. Are we good to go ahead? Let us now learn valuation of future contract. Let us say spot price today is 100. Risk-free rate of return 10%. N was 1. We decided to enter into long side of forward contract. So this is time 0. This is year 1. On year 1, we have right and obligation to buy underlying asset. What should be the price of the forward contract? 110. Fine. Now, how to calculate value of the contract at maturity? Okay, so at maturity, we've done this example earlier. If the spot price is 150, then it's straightforward for us. We have a right and obligation to buy at 110, price in the market 150. That would give us value of 40. So I want you to write down this example quickly. We are buying at 110, market price 150, value is 40. So when we are at maturity, value of the contract is simply difference between the spot price and the forward price. Future, forward, both. Profit. Value means profit. Value of any contract at inception, value of any contract at inception has to be 0. Okay, imagine if the value was not 0, if the value was plus 10, then maybe you would want to sit and sign infinite number of contracts because you're getting 10 without doing anything. And if the value was minus 10, then of course no one would sign the contract, isn't it? Which means at inception, value to both the parties has to be 0. Now we have to learn valuation when we are in between the two sets. So let us say that after 3 months, 3 months means how many years? 0.25 years. Now the spot price has become 140. If you were long on the contract, will you be happy or unhappy about it? Happy. Why? Because prices have increased, so you are going to make a profit. Now the question is how to determine how much profit we are going to make. And there are 3 different formulas through which you can get the value. But the good news is you don't have to remember any of it once you understand what is the logic behind it. So you would say spot is 140. If I wanted to find out that if I have to sign a new contract for same underlying asset but for 0.75 years, can we find out what should be the price of that new contract? We want to find out the price of a new contract that will mature from today in 0.75 years. So how will we do it? Same formula. Forward price is equal to 140 into 1 plus 10%. But this time it will not be raised to 1. It would be raised to 0.75. One 150.37. Okay. So today's spot price is 140. You gave a call to dealer. You said, what if I want to enter into a new forward contract which expires 0.75 years from now? A dealer will quickly perform these calculations. He will tell you you can do that at a price of 150.37. Now let us say you decided that you want to extract profit out of this contract today itself. How will you do it? After 1 year, you have, after 1 year, you have right and obligation to buy, at 110. You can enter into short side on this new contract. Right? You would go to the same dealer, you would say on the new contract I want to enter onto the opposite side, and opposite side means we will have right and obligation to sell at a price of 150.37, which means 0.75 years from now, on that particular day, I will go to the original party, the first party with whom I have signed this contract. I will give him 110, take the asset. Then I will go to the second party, I will give him the asset, and from him I will take how much? 150.37. And this is going to happen no matter what is the price of underlying asset, because both of these are contractual obligations. Which means on that day, your profit is going to be a confirmed 40.37. Is that correct? But this profit you will have 0.75 years from now. So what is the amount of profit today? So this 0.75, this value we have to discount backwards for 0.75. So we would say 40.37 divided by 1 plus 10% raised to 0.75, and that will give us how much? 37.58, and this is the value of the contract today. Difficult? You're not understanding? Have you understood this? So I'm going to repeat the process again. On time 0, spot price was 100. On time 0, spot price was 100. You went to a dealer, you said I want to enter into long side of a forward contract 1 year from now. So your dealer used a simple formula, spot into 1 plus RFR raised to n, and he told you that forward price is going to be 110. You took a long position on the forward contract. Okay, so this long position was signed a year back. Now, once this long position was signed, after 0.25 years, the price of the underlying asset was 140. So you called up the dealer again. You said, what if I want to sign a new contract, but that would be how many years from now? 0.75 years from now. So he used the same formula. He told you that price would be 150.37. You decided, fine, on this new contract, I want to take a short position. You already have a long position on 110. That means 0.75 years from today, on this particular day, you will buy the underlying asset at 110. You will sell the asset at 150.37, irrespective of what is the price in the market, which means on that day, you are going to earn 40.37. But this profit you will have 0.75 years from now. So present value of that profit today is going to be 37.58, which is the value of contract. And how is this value put to use? Instead of doing this entire story, you would just call the counterparty and you will say, see, I can do this. So why don't you pay me 37.58 today and let's clear off the contract. Following this, so this process would be called as cash settlement. And to find out how to find out that cash settlement value, we have to perform this calculation. So this gives us a formula. Can I clear off the screen? So the formula is value of a forward contract. Now at level 1 exams, it is unlikely that you would be required to calculate this because the command word in the LOS says explain. Okay, it does not say calculate, which means you are not calculating this, but you should have, if you know how to calculate, you will have a better understanding of this. So value of the forward contract is equal to forward price or future value of spot minus forward price divided by 1 plus interest rate raised to n. Now this formula is same as the calculation we performed, but there is also a shortcut formula available, which is spot minus present value of future price or forward price. That would have also got us the same answer. Okay, we write down both the formulas. I'll show you how it would get us the same answer. So in the same example, this was 100, this was at 0.25, it was how much? 140, and we had entered into a contract price at 110. Other way of solving this is you can just take present value of 110 and reduce that here. So 110 divided by 1 plus 10% raised to raised to 0.75. How much is this? 102.41, and 140 minus 102.41, 37.6. So even this process will get you the same answer. And there is one more shortcut. Another way is you can take this 100 forwards for 0.25 years and take the difference. So 100 into 1 plus 10% raised to 0.25, how much? 0.41, and take difference of 102.41 and 140. That will again give you same answer, 37.6. It's simple time value of money. You're just moving numbers. Yeah, that was for understanding purpose. Okay, you can just use any of the three formulas. This is the least preferred formula because not necessary you will have this price always. Okay, so maybe we'll summarize the entire circus for you here. So this is spot at time 0. This is spot at 0.25, and this is where we have a forward price. The first mechanism was take this here. Let me call this as A. Then take the difference of F minus A. Let me call this as B, and then take this B backwards. This was the first method. Okay, the first calculation that we did. Second method is this is S0, this is S0.25, this is forward. Simply take this forward backwards. Let me call this as C. S minus C is your answer directly, which is V. Yeah, bringing backwards. That means taking present value and just calculating the difference. The third method, so let me do it on the first flowchart itself. Third method, take this forwards, let me call this as H, and this minus H will again give you the value. All the three methods will fetch you the same answer. And as far as exams are concerned, you need not know any one of them. You just need to know that value is the amount of profit or loss at any point of time. Are we fine here? Next concept. Next concept I feel is particularly important for your syllabus because this is a new addition to the, we know that derivatives, the syllabus has changed, and this particular LOS wasn't there in the syllabus in the previous derivative section. Okay, generally anything that changes in the syllabus is a high probability concept. So understand this now. What we said is that forward price or a no arbitrage forward price was equal to spot into 1 plus interest rate raised to n. Why? Because we saw that otherwise there can be a cash and carry arbitrage. That means buy this spot and carry it for 1 year. So instead of writing it like this, I'm writing it in this fashion. Spot plus interest cost. So when you are dealing with a financial security, the only cost you will incur to carry the asset is the financial cost. But think of a scenario when you are looking at a forward price on a commodity, let's say something like gold. So you purchase the gold, so we will have spot plus that gold will have an opportunity cost, the amount will have an opportunity cost, so we will have interest cost. But because there is a possibility that that gold might be stolen or something might go wrong, you might want to also have a bank locker, isn't it, to store that gold for 1 year. So another cost that we will incur is storage cost, which is a part of carrying cost. We will have storage cost, and maybe there still could be a theft in a bank locker, who knows. So interest cost, storage cost, plus we might also want to insure that gold, so we will say insurance cost. But the good news is, so let's say this was gold jewelry and one of your friends was getting married and he or she wanted to rent that jewelry. Right? Gold is a leasable asset, you can give it on rent. So when you give it on rent, it helps you recover some part of the cost. Right? So therefore we will say minus whatever are the benefits we will have, and one of the benefit is lease yield. And you would have one more benefit of holding the asset, and that benefit would be called as convenience yield. Okay, so spot plus interest cost plus storage cost plus insurance cost plus any other cost required to carry that asset minus lease yield, convenience yield, or any other benefit we received by holding the asset. Okay, lease yield is straightforward, giving the asset on rent and then earning the yield. What would be the meaning of convenience yield? Correct. So convenience yield, how you want to think of this is, think of two factories. Let's say factory A and factory B. Both of these factories are operating into food and beverages industry. Okay, and what they do is they make some snack out of soya beans. Okay, so their input is the soya beans as a input in the manufacturing facility. Now every month the typical quantity which is sold is 100 tons and 100 tons. The policy of company A is, or factory A is, that at any point of time the quantity that they will store would be 100 tons. For the next month, for the next month's requirement, they will have a forward contract signed. That means amount of inventory kept in the factory at any point of time is only 100 tons based on the consumption pattern. Whereas policy of factory B is at any point of time they store 500 tons. That means they store for 5 months in advance. Now imagine out of a sudden a large customer comes up and the customer requires an immediate output, let us say of 400 tons. Will factory A be able to produce that? So factory A might lose that customer, but factory B will still be able to execute that deal because it stored excess inventory. So by storing excess inventory, we are incurring a larger opportunity cost. But then we have that intangible benefit that if a large customer comes to us, then we can execute that order immediately. Correct? And this is precisely the definition of convenience yield, the amount of benefit derived by holding the asset as against entering into a forward or future contract. Okay, so please write down the definition. Convenience yield, amount of benefit amount of benefit, in bracket write down intangible, in bracket intangible, bracket close, amount of benefit derived, by holding the asset, as against entering into long side of forward or future contract. Are we fine? Next sentence. Convenience yield cannot be shorted. Convenience yield cannot be shorted, and therefore it is difficult to exploit arbitrage. Therefore it is difficult to exploit arbitrage on forward contracts. Okay, you cannot have a short position on convenience yield. You can always have a long position. If you have commodity, you are having convenience yield, but you cannot sell that convenience yield or have a short position. So if your forward price of a commodity contract does not come out as per the formula, then it is difficult to exploit arbitrage as against had the underlying asset been a financial asset. Okay, and if you've not understood this sentence, just remember it, that we cannot exploit arbitrage easily on commodity forward contracts because it is intangible, correct? So we'll stop for a small break, 5 minutes, then we'll start again.